You know that moment when you're standing on a street corner in a foreign city, completely lost, and you finally work up the courage to tap someone on the shoulder and ask for directions?
And then they start talking, and you realize you have absolutely no idea what they just said, even though you've been studying English for years.
Right. And here's what's fascinating. It's not really about the language at all, is it? There's something deeper happening in that interaction.
There really is. I've taught thousands of students who can conjugate verbs perfectly, who know their vocabulary inside and out, but when it comes to actually asking a stranger for help, they freeze. Or worse, they ask the question beautifully and then can't understand the answer.
So today, we're breaking down the entire anatomy of asking for directions in English. Not just the words, but the psychology, the cultural codes, the hidden patterns that native speakers don't even realize they're using.
And we're going to give you the one technique that changes everything. The safety net that works whether you're anxious, whether you missed half the words, whether the person has a thick accent. It's so simple, but almost nobody uses it.
Asking for directions isn't really about directions. It's about vulnerability, about human connection, about the courage to admit you need help. And once you understand that, everything changes.
Let's start with the very first words out of your mouth, because that's where most people get it wrong, and it's actually the most important part of the entire interaction.
What strikes me about asking for directions is how it's never really about the directions themselves. It's about that first moment of contact with a complete stranger. Those opening seconds can completely reshape the entire interaction.
Oh, I see this constantly with my students. They come to me frustrated because they know the vocabulary, they know how to say, "Where is the library?" perfectly, but people seem cold when they ask, and they can't figure out why.
Right, because they're missing something fundamental. Imagine you're walking down the street, lost in your own thoughts, and someone just appears in front of you and says, "Central Park?" Just those two words. What's your honest reaction?
I'd probably be a bit startled, maybe even slightly annoyed. It feels abrupt, doesn't it? Like they're demanding something from me without acknowledging that I'm a person with my own agenda.
And this is what I find so interesting. It's not that the person asking is trying to be rude. In their language, maybe that directness is perfectly normal. But in English, especially in Western cultures, you're essentially interrupting someone's private bubble. You need a key to unlock that door first.
The key being "excuse me." It's such a small phrase, but it does so much work. It's an acknowledgement that you're aware you're interrupting. You're saying, "I see you, I respect your space, and I'm asking permission to enter it."
There's research on this, right? About how English learners make this mistake?
Yes, it's been documented as one of the most common, huge mistakes. Students will approach native speakers and just say the destination name, Charles River, and they genuinely don't understand why people seem put off. It comes across as lazy or even rude, but really it's a cultural gap in understanding how English speakers frame requests.
So what's happening psychologically when someone says, "excuse me," versus when they don't?
Well, there's this concept in linguistics called negative politeness, and I know that sounds like a contradiction, but stay with me. It's about minimizing the imposition you're placing on someone. When you say, "excuse me," you're essentially saying, "I know I'm asking something of you, and I want to make this as painless as possible."
Negative politeness. I love that term. It's like you're actively working to reduce the burden of your request. Precisely. And the research backs this up. Studies on English learners show that about 55% prefer these negative politeness strategies. They use indirect language, apologies, hedging phrases. It's all about showing respect for the other person's autonomy. But is this just a Western thing? Because I've traveled to places where being that indirect would seem almost dishonest. You're touching on something really important. Yes, this is very much a cultural framework. In some cultures, directness is valued as honesty and efficiency. But in English-speaking contexts, especially in the US and UK, there's this dance we do. We pretend the request isn't really a big deal, even when both parties know it is. It's almost like a social fiction we all agree to participate in. That's a beautiful way to put it. And once you understand that fiction, you can play the game. So after "excuse me," what comes next matters just as much. I always tell my students, don't just launch into your question, add another layer of politeness, such as, "Could you help me?" or "Do you have a moment?" These phrases are doing something really clever. They're giving the other person an out. You're framing it as a request they can decline, even though socially most people won't. So you're creating the illusion of choice. Yes, but it's not manipulative, it's respectful. You're acknowledging their agency. And here's the thing, it works. Research shows that polite opening phrases like "pardon me," "sorry to bother you," or "do you happen to know" significantly increase the likelihood of getting a helpful response. Wait, sorry to bother you? You're literally apologizing for something you haven't done yet. You're preemptively acknowledging the inconvenience. Right, and to someone from a more direct culture, that might seem absurd. Why apologize for asking a simple question? But in English, it's a signal. It says, I'm aware of social norms. I'm not entitled. I'm grateful for your time. This makes me think about power dynamics too, because when you say, could you help me, you're putting yourself in a slightly vulnerable position. You're admitting you need something, and that vulnerability is disarming. It's much harder to be cold to someone who's openly asking for help than to someone who's demanding information. You're inviting them into a collaborative moment rather than treating them like a human GPS. The difference between "where is the station" and "could you help me find the station?" Same information being requested, but the second one creates a completely different relationship. Right, because "where is the station" is just a transaction, but "could you help me find the station" is a micro-relationship. You're briefly becoming two people working together on a problem, rather than one person extracting information from another. So if you're a beginner learning English, what's the formula? What's the safest, most universally effective opening? Excuse me plus a polite question frame. So, excuse me, could you help me? Or, excuse me, do you have a moment? Then pause. Let them respond. Don't just barrel through with your question. The pause is crucial, isn't it? You're waiting for permission. Yes, and most people will give it. They'll say sure, or of course, or just nod. And now you've established a consensual interaction. They've agreed to help you. The whole dynamic is different. How does "pardon me" compare to "excuse me"? Slightly more formal, maybe a touch old-fashioned, but it works the same way. Some people find it charming, actually. It has a kind of genteel quality to it. I'm also thinking about body language here, because you can say "excuse me" in a way that's aggressive or dismissive. The words alone aren't enough. Oh, completely. Tone is everything. You want to sound genuinely apologetic for the interruption, not entitled. And your body language should match. Don't invade their space. Maybe keep a slight distance. Make eye contact, but don't stare them down. It's like you're performing humility. In a way, yes, but I don't think it's insincere. I think it's acknowledging a social reality, that you are asking something of a stranger, and that deserves a certain level of respect and care. Here's something I've noticed, though. Once you get this right, once you nail that opening, people are often incredibly generous. They'll go out of their way to help you. It's like you've unlocked something in them. Because you've treated them like a person, not a resource. You've acknowledged their humanity, and they respond in kind. It's quite beautiful when you think about it. These tiny linguistic rituals that allow strangers to connect, even briefly. So for someone listening who's learning English, the message is don't skip the opening. Don't think it's just filler or unnecessary politeness. It's the most important part of the interaction. Master, excuse me, could you help me? And you've already won half the battle. The actual question about directions is almost secondary at that point. You've established yourself as someone worth helping. And there's something deeper here too, about how language shapes our relationships with strangers, how these small phrases create the possibility of kindness between people who have no obligation to each other. That's what I love about teaching this. It's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's about learning how to be in the world with other people, how to ask for what you need while respecting what they need. That's a skill that goes way beyond directions.
The way the same language can set you up for disaster depending on which country you're in. I was reading about someone who got genuinely confused in London because they were told to walk on the pavement.
Oh, the pavement trap. I've seen this happen. In the UK, pavement is where you walk, what Americans call the sidewalk. But if you're American and someone says, stay on the pavement, your brain might tell you to walk in the street, which is not ideal for your health.
It's almost poetic, isn't it? The same word meaning the exact opposite thing. What's the road surface in the UK then?
Just the road, usually, or tarmac if you want to be specific. But here's what gets me. This isn't just vocabulary trivia. When you're learning English and trying to ask for directions, these differences can genuinely disorient you. You think you understand, but you're operating with the wrong mental map.
The mental map thing is interesting. Because it's not just about translating words, it's about translating the entire infrastructure of how people think about moving through space. Like, what about getting around cities? I know there's the whole subway versus tube thing.
Right. So in London, it's the tube or the underground. In New York, it's the subway. But then you go to other American cities and they might call it something entirely. Boston has the T. It's less about the word and more about each city has its own personality, its own way of talking about itself.
How much of this is just arbitrary vocabulary versus how much reflects something deeper about the culture? Like, why does London call it the tube? The tunnels are literally tube-shaped. It's very literal, very British in a way. Describe what you see. Americans went with subway because it's under the way? Under the street? I don't know, actually. But there's something about American English that tends toward the functional, the descriptive of purpose rather than form.
Huh. I never thought about it that way. What about when you're actually trying to navigate? Because I've noticed people give directions very differently depending on where they're from.
Oh, this is where it gets personal for me. I am terrible with street names and numbers. Absolutely terrible. If someone tells me, go to 123 Main Street, my brain just doesn't hold on to that. But if they say, it's the building with the blue awning next to the coffee shop with the cat in the window, I can find it instantly. That's a completely different navigation system. You're using landmarks, visual memory. Right. And I've noticed this varies culturally too. In some places, people are very grid-oriented. Go 3 blocks north, turn left. In others, it's all about landmarks and relationships between things. When you're learning English, you need to be ready for both systems. So if I'm asking for directions as a beginner, I might need to specifically ask for the kind of directions I can actually use. Like, can you describe the buildings, instead of just accepting street names I won't remember? Yes. And here's where the UK-US divide comes back. British people, in my experience, are more likely to give you landmark-based directions. Past the pub, turn at the postbox. Americans are more likely to give you street names and numbers. Neither is better, but you need to know which system you're working with.
What about the roads themselves? Because I know there's different terminology for different types of roads.
Oh, completely different. In the UK, you've got motorways. Those are your major highways. Then dual carriageways, which are like divided highways, but not quite motorways. In the US, it's highway, freeway, expressway, and the distinctions between those are fuzzy even to Americans. Is there a functional difference, or is it just regional preference? Mostly regional. A freeway in California is basically the same as a highway in Texas, but people have strong feelings about which word is correct. It's tribal almost. The word you use tells people where you're from. And for English learners, this can be overwhelming. You learn crosswalk in your textbook, then you go to the UK and someone tells you to use the zebra crossing and you're standing there thinking, what zebra? Where?
Wait, zebra crossing? That's what they call crosswalks?
The striped ones, yes, because they look like zebra stripes. Again, very literal. And then you've got roundabouts in the UK, which Americans might call traffic circles or rotaries depending on where you are. Same physical thing, completely different words.
I'm starting to see why this is such a minefield for beginners. You can't just learn the English word for something. You need to learn multiple English words and know which context calls for which one. And here's the thing, native speakers don't even realize they're doing this. A Londoner doesn't think, I'm using British English now. They just say pavement because that's the word. So when you ask for directions, they're not going to automatically translate for you. So what's the strategy? Just learn both sets of vocabulary? Learn to recognize both, but use whichever one fits where you are. And more importantly, learn to ask clarifying questions. If someone says something you don't understand, it's okay to say, I'm not familiar with that word. Can you describe it? Most people are happy to help once they realize there's a vocabulary gap. There's something deeper here, though, about how language shapes the way we navigate. Like, if your language has very specific words for different types of roads, does that change how you think about the journey? Possibly. The British distinction between motorway and dual carriageway reflects actual legal and structural differences. Americans lump more things under highway. Does that mean Americans think about roads more generically? I don't know, but the vocabulary definitely reflects different systems of organization. And regional slang adds another layer. I'm thinking about how in some places people say the 405 or the 5 for highways with the, and in other places that sounds completely wrong. That's very Southern California, the. And people from there will defend it passionately. It's not just I-5, it's the 5. It's almost affectionate, like the highway is a character in your life, which it is if you spend hours a day on it. The language reflects the relationship. Right. And that's what makes this hard to teach in a textbook.
You can memorize that pavement means sidewalk in the UK and road surface in the US, but understanding why people talk about roads the way they do, that requires actually being in the place, experiencing the culture of movement. So for a beginner trying to navigate this, what's the most important thing to remember? That confusion is normal and okay. If you ask for directions and get an answer that doesn't make sense, it might not be your English that's the problem. It might be that you're operating with different vocabulary. Don't be afraid to ask someone to explain in a different way or to describe what they mean rather than just naming it. And maybe there's something liberating about that. Like, you're not expected to know every regional variation. Even native speakers get confused when they travel. Completely. I still remember the first time someone in Boston told me to bang a Yui, and I had no idea they meant make a U-turn. Language is regional. It's alive. It's constantly shifting. The goal isn't perfect knowledge. It's functional communication and the willingness to bridge gaps when they appear.
The moment after you ask for directions. That split second where you're about to receive information that could either save you or send you wandering in circles for another hour.
Oh, that moment is everything. And here's what most beginners don't realize. The hard part isn't asking the question. It's understanding the answer. Because the person helping you, they're not thinking about your English level. They're just talking.
Right, they're in their natural mode. Which brings up something I've been curious about. Why do Americans and Brits give directions so differently? I remember being in London once, and someone told me, take the second left, then go straight. Very direct. But in New York, it was all, you're going to want to go down this street, then you're going to see a Starbucks.
Yes, this is the gonna factor, and it trips people up constantly. American English speakers love using be going to, or more commonly the informal gonna, when giving directions. You're gonna want to go down this street. You're gonna see a big building. British speakers, they use imperatives, commands. Turn left, walk straight, take the second right.
So if you've learned British English in school and you land in Chicago, you're waiting for the command that never comes. Instead, you get this stream of gonna, and your brain is trying to translate it back into the textbook version. Meanwhile, the person is already 3 steps ahead in their explanation.
The psychology of it is interesting. The American version almost sounds more collaborative. Like, you're gonna wanna. It's suggesting rather than commanding.
That's a really good observation. It does feel softer, doesn't it? Less authoritative. But for a beginner, that softness can actually make it harder to extract the essential information. A command is clear. Turn left. Done. But you're gonna wanna maybe turn left. Now you're processing extra words, extra uncertainty.
So what do you tell beginners? Just brace for the gonna?
Essentially, yes. Train your ear to recognize that gonna equals action. When you hear you're gonna, mentally translate it to you will, or even just the verb itself. You're gonna turn left becomes turn left in your mental notes. Strip away the conversational padding and grab the core instruction.
That makes sense. Though I imagine there's another layer of confusion. The actual words themselves. Like, I've heard people argue about whether you turn at a corner or on a corner.
Oh, the preposition pitfall. This is where even advanced learners stumble. The rule is quite specific, but it feels counterintuitive. You turn at a corner or at an intersection, not on. But you might walk on a street. Wait, why? What's the logic there? Think of at as a point in space. A corner is a specific point where 2 streets meet. You're making a decision at that point. But on suggests a surface, a line you're following. You walk on the street. You drive on the road. The street is the surface beneath you.
So at is the decision point, on is the path.
Right. But here's the thing. Native speakers will say on the corner when they mean a location. There's a coffee shop on the corner. That's fine because the corner is where the shop sits. But for the action of turning, it's at. Turn left at the corner.
This is making my head hurt a little, and English is my first language.
Right? Now imagine you're a beginner, you're already nervous, you're trying to process gonna, and now you're second guessing whether the person said at or on and whether it even matters. This is why the next skill is so critical, which is confirmation, repeating it back. This is my non-negotiable technique for anyone asking directions. You listen to the whole thing, then you say it back in your own words. So I go straight and then turn left at the traffic light, right? You're not just checking your understanding, you're giving them a chance to correct you before you walk away.
That requires a certain kind of courage, doesn't it? You're essentially admitting you might not have understood perfectly.
It does, and that's where a lot of learners get stuck.
They're so worried about seeming incompetent that they just nod and smile and hope they got it right. Then they end up more lost than before.
I've done that, not with language barriers, but just not wanting to seem like I wasn't paying attention. You nod, you walk away, and 30 seconds later you realize you have no idea what they said.
Right. So the confirmation technique does two things. One, it catches mistakes immediately. If you say turn right and they meant turn left, they'll correct you right there. Two, it forces you to process the information actively. You can't repeat something back if you didn't understand it.
What's the best way to phrase it? Because I imagine there's a wrong way to do this that sounds, I don't know, robotic? Good question. The key is to make it sound natural, like you're thinking out loud. Not, please confirm. I proceed straight and execute a left turn at the traffic signal. More like, okay, so straight ahead, then left at the light? You can even add a little uncertainty in your voice. So I'm going straight and then left at the big intersection? That invites them to jump in if you're wrong. The uncertainty is strategic. Completely. It signals that you're open to correction without making it a formal quiz. People are much more likely to help when they don't feel like they're being tested. There's something else happening here that I think is worth sitting with for a moment. The patience required to actually listen when you're anxious.
Say more about that.
Well, think about the state you're in when you're lost. Your stress level is elevated. Maybe you're late for something. Maybe you're in an unfamiliar place and feeling vulnerable. And now someone is giving you information that you desperately need, but it's coming at you in a language that requires extra processing power. Every instinct is screaming at you to just move, to do something, to not stand there looking confused.
And that's when people make mistakes. They grab the first piece of information, turn left, and they're already walking before the person finishes with at the second light, not the first one.
Right. So there's this paradox where the more anxious you are, the more you need to slow down and listen carefully. But anxiety makes you want to speed up.
This is why I always tell students, take a breath before you ask. Literally, one deep breath. It signals to your nervous system that you have time. You're not in immediate danger. You can afford to listen to the complete answer.
That's almost meditative.
It is, and it works. I've seen students transform their comprehension just by giving themselves permission to pause. The information doesn't change, but their ability to receive it does.
What about when you're listening and you realize halfway through that you've lost the thread? Like they're on step 3 and you're still trying to process step 1.
Oh, that happens all the time. And here's what you do. You interrupt politely. Sorry, can you repeat the first part? Most people will not only repeat it, they'll slow down. They'll realize you need a different pace, but you have to speak up. Suffering in silence helps no one.
There's a vulnerability in that, though. Admitting you're lost in the explanation about being lost.
There is, but I'd argue it's a strength. It shows you're engaged, actually trying to understand. The people who just nod and pretend, they're the ones who end up asking 3 more people the same question.
So if we're thinking about the complete skill set here, you need to recognize the gonna pattern, you need to catch the right prepositions, you need to have the courage to confirm, and you need the patience to actually listen despite your anxiety. That's a lot.
It is a lot. But here's the thing. You don't need to be perfect at all of it. If you can just do the confirmation part, you've already solved most of the problem. Because even if you misheard gonna, even if you mixed up at and on, when you repeat it back, they'll catch it. So the confirmation technique is the safety net. Right. It's the one skill that compensates for all the others, which is why I'm so insistent about it. You can be a beginner, you can be nervous, you can miss half the words, but if you repeat it back, you're going to get where you need to go. That's reassuring. It takes the pressure off being perfect. That's the whole point. Language learning isn't about perfection. It's about communication. And sometimes communication means saying, wait, did you say left or right? That's not failure. That's success.
I'm thinking about all the times I've been too proud to ask for clarification. Not even in a foreign language, just in life. And how much simpler things would have been if I just said, can you repeat that?
You know what strikes me most about this whole conversation, Emma? We started talking about asking for directions.